you think we can start? It's not yet 5, but I'm sure you have busy evening schedules. So maybe we can start right away. Well, I think we had maybe one of the most effective meetings of the Security Council, consultations of the Security Council in the history of this institution, because the meeting lasted 7 minutes, and we successfully dealt with 2 issues. We adopted the program of work, and also there is another very important issue, which I'm going to describe to you a little later. Well, so, ladies and gentlemen, the Russian presidency in the Security Council has started, and today the members of the Security Council have approved their program of work for the month of October. We intend to hold at least 20 meetings of the Security Council, including 2 open debates on the Middle East and on women, peace and security, and 2 debates on Haiti and on cooperation between the United Nations and regional organizations. The second debate on October 28 would be our central piece in the program. We plan to focus on cooperation between the United Nations and Collective Security Treaty Organization, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and Commonwealth of Independent States in maintaining international peace and security. We shall invite heads of those organizations to brief the Council. We assume members of those organizations will take part in the debate. The Secretary General will brief the Security Council members at this debate, as well as at the meeting on women, peace and security. At this point, we plan to adopt 2 resolutions. The first one on October 6, on the extension of the authorization for member states to inspect and seize vessels believed to be involved in illegal human trafficking and smuggling in the Mediterranean. On October 13, we plan to extend the mandate of MINUSTA. The first part of the month, the Council will mostly be engaged with African issues. On October 4, the Council will discuss the situation in Darfur. On October 6, a meeting on Mali is scheduled. On October 10, Central African Republic is on the agenda. October 11, Democratic Republic of the Congo. October 17, we shall discuss the report of the Secretary General on South Sudan, which should contain information on the state of affairs with the Regional Protection Force deployment. It is also likely that we have consultations on Burundi in October. The Council will also deal with Haiti. This week we will meet with troop-contributing countries to MINUSTA. As you may have heard, a hurricane hit the island. This means we can have some logistical issues with organizing the briefing by SRSG. After resolving them, we'll announce the exact date. At this point, we plan to hold a traditional debate on Haiti on October 11 in the afternoon. The second half of the month will be more focused on the Middle East. On Syria, the 3rd week of October, 17th, we'll start with a briefing by Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura. The meeting on the humanitarian situation in that country will be held on October 26. On October 27th, Ms. Gamba, head of the Joint Investigative Mechanism, will present her 4th report on the use of chemicals in Syria. She will be accompanied by High Representative Kim Won-soo. Regular consultations on Western Sahara, which traditionally include briefings by both head of MINURSO and personal envoy Christopher Ross, are scheduled on October 18. The quarterly open debate on the Middle East is on October 19. Next day, we will hear from Special Envoy Ismail Ahmed on Yemen. Consultations on Lebanon are scheduled for October 27. On October 26, traditional briefing by President Judge of the International Court of Justice to the Security Council will take place. Another important issue is a possible Security Council meeting on ISIS-strategic report pursuant to Security Council Resolution 2253, which was issued September 30. We'll see if there is a need to schedule such a discussion. Now, one item which is outside of the program of work, an area formula, but I think you will be interested to hear about those plans as well. 5 delegations, Angola, Egypt, Malaysia, Senegal, and Venezuela, are planning to convene on October 14 an area formula meeting on Israeli settlements in the Palestinian territories. That's why October 14 is not occupied by official Security Council business. Now, that other very important subject which we discussed so successfully today was our presentation of a draft Security Council, UN Security Council resolution which was announced, the intention to introduce that draft was announced by Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in his statement to the political debate of the General Assembly on September 23. And this is a draft resolution aimed at countering terrorist ideology and violent extremist ideology. We believe that resolute action by the Security Council is needed to stop the worldwide spread of propaganda of terrorism and its distorted narratives. The ongoing growth of radicalism has been bolstered by modern technologies. They're effectively used by terrorist groups, ISIL, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, and their affiliates, to recruit new members online through popular social networks. The most vulnerable audience is youth. Despite some claims that ISIL propaganda loses its effectiveness in Syria or Iraq, we are convinced that there is, unfortunately, a growing demand for it throughout the globe, including the most developed countries. Time has come, in our view, to accumulate the resources and expertise of the international community to create a robust counter-campaign against this trend. Back in 2005, the Council adopted Resolution 1624, aimed at criminalizing incitement to terrorism, one of the Council's basic counter-terrorism decisions. Many of its provisions remain as relevant as they were 11 years ago. Nevertheless, the nature of the threat has changed dramatically. We need to update the decisions adopted at an earlier stage. Our draft resolution is primarily focused on prohibiting and countering terrorist propaganda, including acts of public justification of terrorism intended to incite to further terrorist activities. The emphasis is on the use of the internet or social networks for these purposes. We also intend to develop a UN-centered approach to implementing this provision. It includes some adjustments to the relevant Security Council mechanisms. Those who incite to terrorism have to be sanctioned like other supporters of terrorism. We suggest to include issues of countering terrorist propaganda in the ongoing dialogue of the Counterterrorism Committee and its Executive Directorate with Member States. Moreover, the draft has a set of measures on international cooperation, including exchange of information, assistance, and coordination. We believe that the threat of terrorist propaganda is common to everybody, and we count on the support of our initiative in the Council and among wider UN membership. And now, the final topic I'd like to address in my opening remarks is, of course, that of the process of the selection of the next Secretary General. As you know, we agreed previously that on Wednesday, October 5, we'll conduct our 6th straw poll, and for the first time, we'll go into different colors. That means that people will see how permanent members of the Security Council vote, and if there is a possibility of a veto or not with regard to various candidates. And this morning, we had our new tradition to start the first morning of any new presidency by a breakfast among 15 perm reps only, and we had a preliminary discussion, and I had the feeling that the members of the Council are leaning towards moving to a formal vote. We agreed to discuss that additionally immediately after this straw poll on October 5, but I think there is a good chance that a few days after that, we'll go to a formal vote, and then things will become clear as to do we have a candidate who we are prepared to recommend to the General Assembly? Are we close to having a candidate whom we might be prepared to propose to the General Assembly, or do we need to start from scratch? So those are issues of considerable importance, and we'll have to navigate through those waters within the next few days.
So do we?
We'll see. I sincerely hope we do, because I think, you know, everybody was so enthusiastic with this process, but it has been a time-consuming process, you know, and with all the hearings and with the straw polls. So I do sense this feeling of constructive fatigue among members of the Security Council, which hopefully will turn into a unanimous or a recommendation of a good person for the General Assembly to appoint as the Secretary General. We'll start at 10 on Wednesday, the straw poll. Please. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. President, I'm sorry.
Mr. President Churkin, On behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, welcome and thank you for your time and your own press conference. I have two small questions. One is on the resolution on Syria, and I wonder if the other member state agreed to reevaluate the monitoring mechanism that you don't like. Russia is willing to support the resolution. The second one, are you still convinced that under your mandate you'll be able to propose a woman for as next Secretary General of the United Nations?
Well, on the latter one, we, as you know, we have our gender balance has been restored, but what the result of this process is going to be, I cannot predict. On this resolution, of course, you are referring to the French, I assume, draft, which has been so much in the media. I think, and we are now discussing it, so it's a little bit difficult or awkward for me to speak about it at the initial stages of discussion. A new draft was circulated late last night, and this afternoon we had discussion among the experts, so it would be interesting to see how other countries respond to it. But, you know, my personal sort of initial reaction, or like the day after the initial reaction, is twofold. Well, first of all, if the idea of the draft resolution is to move us towards cessation of hostilities regime, then a resolution would not really work. Just a resolution would not really work. In my view, what might work is if we were to agree on stronger concerted action against terrorists. Because cessation of hostilities, first of all, is not supposed to apply to terrorist groups. As you know, from the outset, when the regime of cessation of hostilities was established by the Russian Federation and the United States, it was not was supposed to apply to Nusra or ISIL. And secondly, they are the spoilers. You may adopt a dozen resolutions, but they will keep violating the cessation of hostilities. And unfortunately, especially with Nusra, as we have discussed many times before, and as Foreign Minister Lavrov was speaking to you in great detail from this very platform a few days ago, they are working with some other groups. They are regarded by the United States as moderate groups, but even the United States does not deny that they are in contact, in cooperation with Nusra. So you may adopt one resolution after another, and as long as they are not, they keep fighting. Is it really realistic to expect a cessation of hostilities? So in my mind, the best opportunity to have a realistic chance for cessation of hostilities was to put in effect those Russian-American understandings which were reached by Sergei Lavrov and John Kerry on September 9, which really were supposed to tighten the screws on the terrorist organizations. But unfortunately, my understanding is that we're not there yet in terms of implementing those understandings. And the other element of the French resolution is some kind of a new monitoring mechanism. There we are a little bit baffled because there is a monitoring mechanism in Geneva. As you know, on the sort of working level, the International Syria Support Group has split into two subgroups. One on the humanitarian situation, humanitarian issues in Syria, and the other on cessation of hostilities. And they have been meeting regularly in Geneva, and the only countries which were supplying any kind of information about violations of cessation of hostilities were Russia and the United States. With all due respect for France, they have never given any information about any violations or alleged violations of cessation of hostilities. So what kind of recommendation do we expect from the Secretary General? And that mechanism is chaired by Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura. So to us, it's a little baffling what the intention is. If we want to see stronger mechanism, we need to be engaged more in this. And you know, various countries whom everybody knows support various groups fighting in Syria, they could maybe share some information with this group on cessation of hostilities. So we'll see. Once again, this discussion has only started. I don't know what the plans of the French delegations are, but I do hope that we'll get involved in a serious conversation rather than pushing things through, which may be not very useful and may not make much of a sense practically.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. A quick follow-up to what Gianpaolo just asked. I think one of the provisions also was on the grounding of aircraft, particularly around Aleppo. I wonder what your reaction to that was, and whether you know of any new talks on the horizon between Secretary Kerry and Minister Lavrov. And you raised an issue in your own resolution that you've proposed, which is radicalism, extremism, terrorist groups. Are you concerned that you're going to end up in that same difficulty of trying to define who is a terrorist, and what's a terrorist organization, and does your proposed resolution, which we haven't seen, actually try to deal with that?
Well, not in the general sense of like trying to define terrorism. You know that there has been a long process over the years. But we still believe that we have been dealing with the problems of terrorism here in the Security Council and the United Nations well enough, even in the absence of this generic definition of terrorism. As far as the most burning issues are concerned, Syria, Iraq, the Middle East, we know who we're talking about. On Syria and Iraq, as you know, we defined in the Security Council Nusra and ISIL as terrorist organization. Al-Qaeda is a universally recognized terrorist organization. There are some difficult issues we need to tackle in our draft, so we do not expect it to be worked out and adopted within days. But we hope we can engage in a very serious discussion with our colleagues in the Security Council. Now, I'm not aware of any plans between Sergei Lavrov and John Kerry. Even worse for me, sitting here, I'm not quite sure what was the result or the nature of the discussions which have taken place between us and the United States in the past few hours. So I'm not exactly up to date, and things have been moving on so actively that it is easy to lose track. Yes, please.
On the grounding of the aircraft.
Oh, grounding. This is again something which Sergei Lavrov spoke very clearly about, I think, here before you a few days ago. We cannot accept unilateral steps. We cannot accept unilateral steps. Our position is very simple. If we let's see where terrorists are. We are prepared to sit down with the Americans and discuss where terrorists are. They have been telling us for months now that they can differentiate between the terrorists and the non-terrorists. If our help is needed in this conversation by experts, we are prepared to do that. We have had even sort of other elements to that discussion. For instance, sometimes we heard from the United States that one of the problems was that their targeting methods were much more sophisticated than others. So they were alleging that they're in a better position. They were in a better position to avoid civilian casualties. So we're saying, fine. In that case, this is another incentive for us to get together to make sure that our actions do not cause any civilian casualties. So, but I heard some negative reports out of Geneva, but again, it's difficult for me to talk about that because I don't know exactly what has happened there. Please.
Mr. President, James Bays from Al Jazeera. You are the longest-serving ambassador on the Security Council, more than 10 years in your post. You know better than anyone the main purpose to uphold international peace and security. How do you then explain the fact that your country is carrying out an indiscriminate bombardment along with its Syrian allies, killing civilians, women and children in eastern Aleppo in defiance of international humanitarian law?
Well, first of all, of course, I cannot subscribe to the less than elegant phrasing of your question. I understand where you are coming from. Well, had it not been for our involvement in Syria, it might well be that the black flags would be flying over Damascus. It could well be. So this is the reality of the situation, and this is the reality of the situation that Nusra moved to eastern Aleppo. The UN people, Stefan de Mistura, in the open chamber of the Security Council said like half of the fighters, and we think that maybe slightly over half of the fighters are Nusra. They are keeping the civilian population hostage. What we wanted to do is to have a very close cooperation with the United States to fight Nusra as together as we possibly can, given all the political circumstances. Unfortunately, it didn't work out from the perspective of the United States. In the process of the past few weeks, after September 9 arrangements were reached, we have seen numerous violations by Nusra and others sort of cooperating with Nusra of the cessation of hostilities regime. We have seen them launching a major offensive, I think, to the south of Aleppo, where they were threatening to encircle around 1.5 million, people in that area. So we see an extremely, extremely dramatic situation where we must make sure that the Nusra influence is not going to continue to spread, at least in the eastern parts of the country, and they have been trying to go on the offensive in some areas like the Hama area between Damascus and Aleppo. So unfortunately, this thing has allowed to degenerate to this kind of a level where you can see dramatic TV pictures. I have no doubt that our military are trying to do their best in order to avoid civilian casualties. But
A very, very quick follow-up.
Yeah, please.
If you would, Ambassador. I know you're a loyal servant of your country, but do you not feel at all uncomfortable defending this bombardment going on right now?
No, I feel very uncomfortable to see the situation. I do, and I would prefer Syria to be quite a peaceful country. I visited Syria some years ago when it was the model of moderation and tolerance in the Middle East. But then things were blown up the way they were blown up, and it was one of the most prosperous countries in the Middle East as well. I would prefer to see the Syria I saw some years ago, but and it was not our fault that it was pushed in the direction it was pushed into. I'll have to go back. Please, ma'am.
Thank you, Ambassador Churkin. It's Pamela Falk from CBS. Since talk seems to have been stopped, at least on the U.S. Secretary of State Kerry, Lavrov, Foreign Minister Lavrov's side, do you think something can come about here with the cessation of hostilities between you, Ambassador Power, others on the Security Council?
At this point, I do not see an immediate prospect. But, we keep trying. This is the nature of our business. We keep trying. If there is an opening, and again, I need to know more about what happened actually in our discussions in the past few hours with the United States, and if there is a possibility, if it leaves a possibility of doing something productive in the immediate future.
But just as a follow-up, do you think those kind of talks could happen here rather than at Capitol?
Well, I wouldn't rule it out. There have been situations where we were able to sort of kick in and produce something positive. I wouldn't rule it out. I would love to try, but it's not just us getting together and outsmarting everybody else who tried and was not successful. We need to have some realistic reason to believe that we might come to some mutual understanding. But if there is a possibility, we'll definitely try very hard. Matthew, please. Sure.
Matthew Lee, Inner City Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access. Thanks for the briefing and hoping for stakeouts after consultations. I wanted to ask you about Yemen. I know that it's on the agenda, you said it's a regular briefing. Over the weekend, there was a sinking of a UAE ship that some people are saying has the potential to either set things off. I don't know if has anyone raised it to the council. Are you aware of this sinking of some say it's an aid ship, some people say it's a military ship. And I wanted to know, also I wanted to ask you about Western Sahara. You said this is a regular briefing too.
Yeah.
Is it a checking up on the redeployment of the MINURSO peacekeepers that were ejected? Because today they said only 25 of the 83 are back, and I wonder if that's something that the council intends to get to the bottom of.
Well, first of all, I really don't want to turn this press conference into a global overview. I mean, as the agenda proceeds, we'll have a chance at the stakeouts to talk about various issues. We are aware of the situation of the reports from the sinking of the ship in Yemen. There is a draft press statement which is out there, but we need to double check on the circumstances. Of course, the situation in Yemen and around it is a disaster, and there is no, I think, a clear sight of where it might lead in terms of a political outcome. But we're following matters very closely. So hopefully, finally, something, a glimpse of hope might emerge from the current situation, even though, again, let me say it does look very gloomy. On Western Sahara, it will be a regular briefing. Please.
Thank you very much. Abdul Hamid Sayam from Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I'm going to shift the question to Palestine rather than Syria. Mr. Ambassador, Palestine has been on the agenda since the inception of the United Nations. The last resolution was adopted on 9 January 2009. The Security Council has been prevented from seriously tackling the issue of the settlement. Although there are open debates, there are sometimes statements. The only time it was debated in 2011, there was a veto by the US. Are you prepared to do something more concrete, not only open debate, not only statement, but to stop this illegal practice of Israel by building more and more settlement?
Well,
thank you.
You know the political circumstances of this, I think, as well as anybody in this room. There is ongoing activity on this matter. I mentioned to you that there is going to be an area formula on the 14th, organized by some members of the Security Council. Russia has been trying very hard to move the process forward. We are in a unique position, I think, that we have good contacts with all the actors. I mean, we are, maybe the United States has better contacts with some of the actors, but we have very good contacts with all the actors. So we try to energize the quartet. We helped create those recommendations. They were not very well received by some, but if they were to be implemented, we believe that the situation would be better for creating some prospect for moving towards a political solution. As you know, we offered Moscow or Russia as a place where President Abbas and Prime Minister Netanyahu could meet, so the offer is still there. And the most important thing, I think, that we are trying to work as a genuine member of collective effort to move things forward. On that particular issue of settlements, we did vote for that resolution, which was vetoed, as you pointed out correctly, by the United States in 2011. Over there, sir.
Joseph Klein of Canada Free Press. I notice in your footnote you have non-proliferation, but was there any discussion today or amongst the members informally about proceeding with a possible resolution regarding North Korea's
There are some discussions.
tests?
There are some discussions. Wells, please. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Ambassador, trying to go back again to put some light on the choosing of the new Secretary General. Are you still with that statement that you have given some times ago that you are actually in favor of choosing a new Secretary General, woman Secretary General? And will you try to enforce your previous statement, positions, that the candidate should come, the successor of Ban Ki-moon, from Eastern European? Are you expecting to finish that process during your presidency as well?
Oh, I said that probably we're not here yet. I hope we will, and I think there is a realistic chance we might, or we have to go doing it from scratch. You know, I think from my conversations with all the candidates, they really appreciate the fact that Russia's position has been straightforward and very clear. We have been saying that we do believe that it's the turn of Eastern Europe to provide the next Secretary General. We would very much like to see a woman, but we are less PR-oriented than some other countries who have been loudly proclaiming their preference for a woman only to start voting for men and against women. We do not do that. But basically, we need to have the best candidate and somebody who can be supported by the Security Council and be popular throughout the system of the United Nations. Yeah. Please, okay, you please.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you know, in the recent weeks, the tensions between India and Pakistan have risen.
I don't want to go there. Don't want to go there. No, please. No, I don't want to go there, please.
Why?
Because I'm president of the Security Council. The Security Council has not been discussing it. Sorry, sir. Sir, I don't want to go. No. No comment. No comment. I'm sorry. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Back to the election of the new Secretary General. I heard, or I'm sure many other journalists heard, that you showed interest in some high positions in the Secretariat cabinet, like the head of the political department in the Secretariat. Can you confirm that? And what's your position on rotation in general when it comes to these high positions?
Well, we'll support the idea of rotation, that's for sure. that we have stated it in our discussions in various formats in the General Assembly. We think that rotation is very important. And yes, we do believe that Russia should be properly represented in the Secretariat. Is it one particular post on another? It's something else, but we are not the only ones who are expressing our interest in various positions. Yes, please.
Okay, we'll start again. I don't understand how Damascus can justify bombing hospitals like in Hama recently and delaying or bombing areas where aid convoys have arrived right after they arrive. It seems to me that there's very little justification. It's as if anyone who opposes the government since 2011 is considered a terrorist.
If somebody has bombed the bona fide hospitals, it is unjustifiable. And as to the humanitarian convoy, it is something which needs to be investigated. You may know that after we were accused publicly in the Security Council meeting by Secretary Kerry of having bombed that convoy, a couple of days later, senior American officials were telling us, well, actually, those were not your planes who bombed the convoy. So now we really need to investigate what happened. Please go ahead.
Let's follow up on the Secretary General question. You said that you think that it should be Eastern Europe. Obviously, you are not going to veto any woman or a man, but are you willing to veto anybody who is not from Eastern Europe?
If we cannot veto any woman or a man, you don't give us much room for a veto. Do you?
Yeah, but on that criterion.
But we find our way,
On that criterion.
Please.
Mr. Ambassador, Mr. President, Russian diplomacy is under extraordinary moral condemnation at the moment. Can I ask you a simple question? What is your message as a diplomat here in the comfort of the UN to innocent civilians trapped in eastern Aleppo? Are you at all concerned at their fate? Are you using your leverage in Damascus, or don't you care?
We are very much concerned about their fate. The terrorists need to be thrown out of Syria and Iraq. This is what needs to be done.
What is
the primary goal of Russia in that part of the world, in Syria and Iraq, is to throw out the terrorists. As long as the terrorists are there, there will be no peace and quiet for the civilians in eastern Aleppo or anywhere else.
But there are hundreds of civilians frightened there tonight. What is your message to those civilians?
I'm sure many more. I'm sure since 2003, hundreds of thousands of civilians have been frightened in Iraq, Syria, in Libya. I can keep going about frightened civilians. So this is a situation which needs to be reversed, and it will take a lot of diplomatic effort. And Russia has been in the forefront of that diplomatic effort.
But do you have a message for them tonight, sir?
Yes, I have a question about 1325. There are women international women peace activists who went from North Korea and South Korea and met with women in both countries. And now they've sent a letter to Ban Ki-moon asking him for a process towards a peace treaty, and also between the two Koreas, and also to involve women in the process. And here we have the situation with North Korea, which the Security Council has not made any progress on, and they're saying we need women involved in doing this and women working for peace. Is there any way that you see to somehow have 1325 actually implemented so that you get some help towards having a peace development?
Well, what we believe is that this is an extremely difficult situation. And the sort of cycle of action and counteraction, which we have seen in the past few years, actually since 2005, when this deal of September 9 fell through, it is not working. So we do believe that we need to try some creative thinking. We don't have sort of specific immediate proposals, but certainly DPRK testing and then US and others conducting some higher level military maneuvers there, beefing up their military presence. That does not help at all. So in that creative thinking, it may well be that the greater involvement of women could be one of the elements that might move the situation forward. Please.
Mr. President, thank you for this press conference. If you were a citizen of the world, you'd be watching alarming statements from both Moscow and Washington. Practically, it seems, some sort of breakdown in any sort of cooperation in various battlefields and diplomatic deadlocks around the world stretching here. It would appear the new UN Secretary General might need a psychiatrist here on duty. What are people supposed to think going forward? A new Cold War, something that an aggressive approach by both governments? You're going to have a new president in the White House. It may not be just the people of Aleppo. What should other people around the world know about these two major powers going forward? Agree to disagree or something more serious?
No, of course, I hope that there is not going to be a new Cold War. Actually, I think you sort of over-dramatized the nature of our differences with the United States globally. We, after a long period when we have been trying to work as closely as possible with the United States in Syria, apparently there is a hitch. I hope this cooperation can be resumed, under some other circumstances. But I'd like to speak closer to sort of my area of responsibility, the United Nations and the Security Council. And I think that still there are plenty of areas where we can work together with the United States. So that is something which encourages me to think that the prospects for the next Secretary General will not be as grim as you have described them. Please.
Thank you. Could you please give us more detail about the meeting on Burundi?
On Burundi?
Yes.
Well,
and also
the meeting has been requested by the French delegation. As you know, we passed a resolution on Burundi where we authorized the United Nations to carry out certain police deployments, sort of observer police deployments in Burundi. And now they are discussing with the government of Burundi what is going to be acceptable to the government of Burundi. The government of Burundi has had some doubts about the usefulness of those deployments in their country. So this is where it stands. And we see how
in your national capacity, what's your view on the situation?
Well, in my national capacity, I think the situation should not be allowed to turn into something dramatic. And I think that this is the idea of that resolution, that the international community, or the African Union and the Security Council of the United Nations may help to make sure that the situation does not get wrong or does not deteriorate in Burundi. Please.
Thank you. My question is about Yemen, where the situation in Yemen is very grave. You mentioned a little bit about it, but when it comes to targeting civilians, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International both accuse the allies of giving the targets to the Saudis, and they are targeting civilian targets. If they are that bad in targeting in Yemen, how can they be better in Syria? Why is the Security Council also so timid about Yemen? The Ismail Sheikh Ahmed doesn't seem to have given any proposals or come forward with any for 18 months now. He hasn't been very proactive on that. Yemenis at least accuse him of that. Also, if we compare Stefan de Mistura with Sheikh Ahmed, there's big difference with relation to his opinions about what's going on the ground.
Well, I don't want
timidity is one of the things that have been said about that.
Comparisons, but I mean, of course, it's a very dramatic situation. But the thing is that in the Security Council, we have 2 out of 5 permanent members who are actually involved in this campaign on the side of the coalition. We all know that, the UK and the United States. And of course, there is a dramatic difference speaking about civilians. If you talk about Syria, the UK would always demand some independent investigation, whatever. In Yemen, they blocked independent investigation, I think, at the Human Rights Council. Why? Because they sold $6 billion of weapons to them in the past couple of years, you know? And they are, of course, participating in the targeting and the whole thing. But when civilian targets are hit there, they do not, their eyes do not even blink. So when you hear this kind of statements, civilians and the whole thing, here in the United Nations, you must also accept that this is an extremely cynical place. In one area, they will whip it up. In another area, they would rather hush it up. So it's...
Follow-up.
Yeah.
Do you regret supporting 2216, the resolution about Yemen?
We did not support it. We were smart
you
enough
you
to
abstained,
abstain.
but you let it go.
Well, you know, I think it was necessary to have this resolution passed because it was hard to justify what the Houthis did, and we never justified what they did. They did something quite extraordinary. But also we realized that that resolution could be abused by the coalition because they might be pushing their demands to a point when they might not show any prospect of a real political deal. Please, sir.
Sir, on Afghanistan, this is Iftikhar Ali from Associated Press of Pakistan. There has been an upsurge of Taliban activity, and today they have entered again the city of Kunduz.
Yes.
Is there going to be any action in the Security Council on this?
Well, it is not envisaged. If I remember my program of work correctly, it's not envisaged for the month of October. This is another problem we have had on Afghanistan. The United States prefers to be as quiet on Afghanistan as possible. Like all those suggestions that maybe we should do a mission of the Security Council to Afghanistan, they die away very quickly because they don't want to expose the things which are there and the fact that they have not been able to do what they were supposed to do over the past 10 years in the course of the U.S. military presence there and NATO military presence. Sir.
Thank you, Ambassador. Halil Mula, RTV 21. Follow up on Aleppo. Does it mean that the Russian planes will continue bombing in Aleppo, no matter on civilian lives lost and destruction caused, even if it is the human catastrophe?
We do not want to see a human catastrophe, and as I said, our military are trying to choose their targets very carefully. Eastern Aleppo has been taken hostage by Nusra and some others who are working with Nusra. Please give us a recipe how to deal about it. We started out, you will recall, by saying that we are creating 7 corridors for the civilians to come out. Those who want to, armed fighters can come out along one of those corridors, even bearing their arms, the whole thing. They didn't want to hear anything about it, and they kept abusing civilians, executing civilians. Please read it's now on the site of our mission, a statement which I made in the council on the 25th. Unfortunately, it was very poorly translated, I am told, but we did our own translation, so you can look at it very carefully. So, well, listen, if you think that civilian casualties is something insignificant to us, you are dead wrong. But this is a situation where some terrorist groups keep fighting, and they are disregarding civilian casualties. Sometimes they are trying to create as many civilian casualties as possible. So this is where it stands. The situation has been allowed to degenerate into this awful mess, and we are trying to find a way out of it and trying to make sure that the black flags are not going to fly over Damascus.
Follow up on that.
With all your reports.
Thank you, Ambassador. I wanted to go back on the resolution that the French have drafted and ask you, first of all, when do you think that would be up for vote in a council meeting? And will Russia veto if the grounding of aircrafts is included in that resolution?
Well, first of all, it's not sort of my resolution; it's the French resolution. So, but the French will decide whether to put it, when to put it to vote. They told us from the outset they want to have a resolution around which Security Council members can unite, and they don't want to see Russian veto. This is what they told us. So, if they were sincere in their assurances, we can have a resolution, I suppose, which would be more balanced. But also, I sort of expressed our attitude. I'm not even sure many other Security Council members would like to see a resolution on cessation of hostilities, which has no chance of working. That really, if you pass a resolution, you expect something to happen. But if the only effect of that resolution is that the Secretary General will start thinking of some monitoring mechanism, which is not going to work in the first place, then there is no much sense in having that resolution. Maybe 2 more questions, please.
Yes, thank you. Somini Sengupta from the New York Times. Just to clarify on that point, will you veto a resolution if it specifically calls for the grounding of warplanes?
Well,
and number 2, just a second question on the Joint Investigation Mechanism, the JIM. Is Russia now prepared to consider some sort of a mechanism to hold accountable those who have used chemical weapons?
On the first issue, well, you know, I try to avoid using the word veto before I have the instructions and before the final product is there. Clearly, we believe that singling out aviation, where terrorists would be allowed to do whatever they want, would not be very attractive. Would not be a very attractive proposition. Would not be a proper way to approach this resolution. Now, the second question was about the gym. We are going to see what the fourth report contains. We were not extremely well. Let me put it this way: the third report, they put a lot of highly professional work in it. But in our view, and we had very detailed analysis of that report. As I put it before, maybe I can sort of repeat this phrase. It does contain a smoking gun, but there are no fingerprints on the smoking gun. So apparently, in some cases, chlorine may have been used, but from what they say in that report, it's impossible to prove that, in fact, it was the Syrian government or the Syrian Air Force which used that. If the fourth report is more persuasive about pointing in the direction of the use of chlorine, then we will evaluate the situation. But let me tell you, I hope you understand. I think it would be plain stupid for the Syrian Air Force to use chlorine bombs. You know, it's a very ineffective weapon. In the same canister, you can deliver much more bang than in this chlorine, which can possibly hurt just a few people. So it's and just to give you one example of the situation where, with all due respect to Jim, extremely professional work. But one of the cases which has been sort of ascribed to the Syrian government. The Syrian government is to blame for it. This barrel bomb with chlorine was supposed to drop through some kind of a chimney, and explode within the building. You know, can you imagine? If you drop a barrel from a helicopter, it starts rolling. If it enters the chimney, and the chimney is about the size of the barrel, we're told, it will ruin half of the house because this barrel keeps rolling within the chimney. In my unprofessional kind of assessment, the much more plausible scenario is somebody was trying to build this chlorine bomb within the house and it went off. Because it's like, and we had this conversation with Ms. Gamba. I said, what were the chances? 1 in a million? She said, yes, 1 in a million. But then I looked at this rolling thing talked about with the military. Not even 1 in a million chance that it could have been dropped from a helicopter and went through this chimney without ruining the whole house. And we have to deal with the situations like this. So to me, actually, I would be relieved if there was an ironclad case saying, well, this is exactly what happened, and you can look at it and say, really, we need to punish those people. But unfortunately, in terms of our desire to punish somebody who may have been involved in that, we don't see that. And just let me say, they were given an impossible task. They were supposed to investigate something which happened 2 years before, without, in many cases, the possibility of visiting even the places. Extremely highly professional work, but they only produced what they produced. Ma'am.
Thank you. Ambassador, you mentioned that more than half of the fighters in eastern Aleppo are al-Nusra. What's your take on the percentage of ISIS, either in eastern Aleppo or in the surrounding areas, and also how significant are the so-called moderate fighters?
The moderate fighters, again, I mentioned that in my statement on the 25th of September in the Council. In eastern Aleppo, the calculation of our military, as of that day, like 3,500 fighters, close to 2,000 of them are Nusra. And then the rest of them are scattered among 20 different groups which are also cooperating with Nusra. ISIL is not there. ISIL is elsewhere. ISIL is around Deir ez-Zor, ISIL is in Raqqa, ISIL is in Iraq. So it's not in the vicinity of Aleppo or Damascus, which is the Nusra territory.
On Deir ez-Zor, of course, after the attack on that mountain overlooking the Deir ez-Zor airport, we've seen the Americans are intensifying their attacks against the bridges in the region. How do you view that?
Against whom?
Bridges in Deir ez-Zor. cutting off Deir ez-Zor from the rest, from one side of the river to of the other side. 4 bridges have been destroyed. How are they coordinating with the Russians?
They are not coordinating.
At all. Also, what are the possibilities that, or the risks that any friction can happen between if there is no coordination?
Well, the conflicting keeps going, because the first arrangement, you will recall, we made with the Americans when our Air Force arrived on the scene, is this deconfliction so that the military aircraft do not sort of interfere in each other's operations. So this is still there. But of course, there is no coordination for like targets. This is what we wanted to have against Nusra and ISIL. That was the essence of September the 9th arrangement of Geneva, but it is not happening. About the bridges, I don't know, I don't have any first-hand information, but I'm not surprised, because remember, 1999, they started bombing Serbia. The first thing they did, bombing bridges across the Danube, which were hundreds of kilometers away from Kosovo, from whoever else. So apparently this is what they do.
And on the warning on chemicals on Sarakib, which the Syrian government presented to the Security Council, that some terrorist groups are preparing some chemical weapons in Sarakib, which is close to the Turkish border.
This is a matter of great concern to us, and this is where the Security Council should have done better. You may recall that a couple of months ago, we suggested a modest modification of the functions of JIM. The modest modification was that we wanted somebody to collect information, not to investigate even, but to collect the information which is coming from various sources about terrorists using or preparing to use chemical weapons. To us, it would have enhanced the awareness of the Security Council as to what is going on. But our Western colleagues said no. For them, balance, as they put it, between the government and the opposition is more important, or terrorists is more important. They didn't want to sort of reorient the JIM towards the terrorists, which in our view did not make any sense, because the terrorists are out there, and we know that they are preparing for the use of chemical weapons. In fact, one unequivocal statement in the 3rd JIM report was that they use, I think, mustard gas in northern Syria. So this was one of the chances missed in the Security Council as far as the terrorists and the chemical weapons are concerned. Please, ma'am.
How does your military actually count the number of terrorists and what groups they're in Aleppo? How do they achieve those numbers? Thanks.
Well, I don't know exactly. We do have military intelligence, and those people have their sources.
But what are the sources?
Well, ma'am.
Ambassador, why are you so reluctant to discuss India-Pakistan conflict? Why is Russia so reluctant to discuss that?
I'm sorry. I'm sure you know. I'm sure. There are so many other things. Please, please.
Mr. Ambassador, look, you've been very patient with us, but I'm still not clear in my mind. Do you come to this press conference with any sense of moral responsibility, or do you regard Syria as just entirely disconnected from Russian foreign policy or Russian military policy? Or do you have a sense of responsibility for what is happening in eastern Aleppo?
When you come clearer in your mind about what you want to ask, please ask me the question.
Well, I'm crystal clear. Do you have a sense of